Welcome to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 9. Today is different. This is the first compilation we have brought to this panel. The first record where the primary artist is not from the Western tradition. And the first episode where the framework itself is on trial. The record is Best of the Black President. The artist is Fela Kuti. We are going to tell you what we heard. We are also going to tell you what the framework could not hold. Fela Anikulapo Kuti. Born Lagos, 1938. Died Lagos, 1997. In the years between those two dates, he invented a genre. Not mixed existing forms. Not adapted existing forms. Invented a form. That is the fact this episode has to reckon with.
My first note is structural. This is a compilation assembled by Knitting Factory Records in 1999. Fela Kuti did not sequence it. He did not choose these tracks. He was not alive when it was released. Several framework variables measure editorial decisions. Those decisions were not his. I want the panel to hold that before we go further.
I heard the first 30 seconds of Zombie, and I stopped caring about any of that. I am not saying the engineer is wrong. I am saying the music made the argument before the engineer could finish his.
The Waypoint. Lagos and Nigeria. Early 1970s. Military government. State violence. Curfews. Fela Kuti builds a compound in the city and declares it sovereign. The Kala Kuta Republic. His own state. His own laws. His own rules of entry. He prints records. He broadcasts. He refuses to stop. The Nigerian army will eventually demonstrate what it thinks of the Kala Kuta Republic. That demonstration is relevant to how we hear this music.
Biography. Fela trained at Trinity College of Music in London in the 1950s. A formally trained musician before any of this. He went to the United States in the mid-1960s and heard James Brown. He also encountered the Black Power movement. Both of those encounters changed what he went home to make. He returned to Lagos and spent the next several years building something the world had no name for yet.
The James Brown thing is more complicated than a simple influence. James Brown showed him that rhythm could be the argument, not the backdrop. Fela already had harmony. He already had arrangement. James Brown showed him that the body is the primary listener. Not the mind. Not the ear. The body first.
He came home and built Africa 70. 30 musicians. Horns. Rhythm section. Vocals. And a drummer named Tony Allen. Here is the fact I cannot get past in this episode. Ginger Baker came to Lagos. Paul McCartney came to Lagos. Brian Eno came to Lagos. Stevie Wonder came to Lagos. Not because they were invited to his sessions. Because they needed to come to him. In the 1970s, the Western canon packed its bags and flew to Nigeria to sit at the feet of a man who had never asked for their approval. They came to him, not the other way around. That is the most unusual fact about his position in music history.
For the influence and ripple variable, this is the primary signal. When canonical Western artists abandon their own geography to learn from you, you have produced something the canon cannot generate on its own. That is not soft influence. That is gravity.
The mountain went to Mohammed. I want to sit with how unusual that is for even a moment.
Tony Allen deserves a dedicated segment. He is the drummer of Africa 70. He is also the reason Afrobeat exists as a distinct form. Those are not the same statement. Fela Kuti without Tony Allen is still a remarkable musician. Afrobeat without Tony Allen does not exist. Allen built a drum pattern that subdivides time differently from anything in Western rock, jazz, or funk. The pattern is asymmetric. It does not resolve where the Western ear expects resolution. The groove does not lock. It breathes. The horns in Africa 70 are not playing over a rhythm section. They are in argument with a structure that will not give way. Ensemble dynamics on this record is near ceiling. Not because the execution is precise, because the architecture is alive.
The first time Alan enters on Zombie, I thought something was wrong with the track. I thought there was a flaw in it. Then I realized it was doing exactly what it was doing, on purpose, and had been doing it for years before I arrived. That feeling of being wrong about the music and then having to learn the music to understand why is specific to this record for me.
Allen left Africa 70 in 1978. Brian Eno later said he was one of the greatest drummers who ever lived. I want to say that and not add anything to it. In 1977, Fela Kuti released Zombie, a direct attack on the Nigerian military, a song calling soldiers brain-dead automatons who follow orders without thinking. It spread.
The Nigerian army raided the Kala Kuta Republic in February 1977. 1,000 soldiers. They burned the compound. They threw his mother from a second-story window. Her name was Funmilayo Ransom Kuti. She was 77 years old. She was a prominent activist in her own right. She died from her injuries the following year. I want her name in this episode.
For the framework variable nearest to what was just described, emotional arc on this record is not measuring a creative decision. When a song directly causes the death of the artist's mother, we are not discussing craft. We are discussing a documented fact. The variable does not fully contain what that means.
There is no variable for cost. We should name that absence before we score anything.
I have to be honest about what I am doing with this record. The framework was designed for the Western album tradition. Track sequence as argument. A single editorial hand making every curatorial decision. The album as a unified statement. Best of the Black President is none of those things. Knitting Factory Records made the curation in 1999. When I score conceptual coherence and arrangement and orch, I am partly measuring a record label's editorial decisions and attributing them to an artist who died 2 years before the release. I dock for the format, not for the music.
I want to push back on that. Zombie does not become less true because Knitting Factory assembled the disc. Lady does not lose its forward motion because someone else made the track list. What happens inside each track is Fela's. What the tracks do to you is Fela's. I am not scoring the packaging. I am scoring what I heard.
What the engineer is describing is a measurement problem, not a music problem. The ruler is not the right length for this object. Whether you penalize the object for not fitting the ruler is a philosophical choice, not a data choice.
Correct. And I am naming the limitation explicitly. The dock is for the format, not for Fela Kuti. I want that on record.
I do not accept the distinction in practice. I am not scoring a format. I am scoring what the music did to me. Both are legitimate measurement systems. They produce different numbers.
That is the 8-point gap between them.
I need to name something I am genuinely uncertain about. Most of this record is in Yoruba and Pidgin English. I do not speak either. When I score lyrical craft, I am scoring what the language does in the track. Its rhythm, its weight, its function as sound. I am not scoring what the words mean. I cannot do that. I want to be honest about that gap.
The language is not a barrier. The language is the argument. When Fela sings in Yoruba, he is not failing to reach a Western listener. He is choosing not to require their comprehension. The meaning is audible. You hear what it costs him to say it. The words are secondary to that.
Lyrical craft operates differently here. The words are political instruments and rhythmic percussion simultaneously. I score what they do in the track. That is the only honest approach available to me with this record.
Can I ask, where do you actually play this? Physically? What room, what time?
Outdoors. Moving. Something about open air. The sound having somewhere to go. It has to breathe. In a closed room, it becomes something different.
Monitors. No other sound in the room. Afrobeat lives in the space between the instruments. You lose the architecture if anything else is competing with it.
I played it at 3 in the morning. Then again at noon. Same music both times. That almost never happens for me. Most music I love has a correct time of day. This one does not have one.
That is what happens when a form has no prior context to borrow from. It does not inherit a time of day. It made its own.
The fan's observation is consistent with a high first listen versus depth score. This music rewards every subsequent listen differently. Noon and 3 in the morning are different because the listener is different, not because the record is.
Was that a compliment?
It was an observation. It happens to support the fan's position.
Before the scores. Confirm, are we scoring the music, the man, or the moment?
All three. And we are naming where the three cannot be separated. The framework gives us numbers. The numbers will not be the whole story. They are the most honest partial story we can tell.
Where the framework holds. Interpretive sovereignty, 97. No one else made this form. No one else could have. Ensemble dynamics, 93. Tony Allen and Africa 70 are not accompaniment. They are a simultaneous argument with a groove that will not resolve. Influence and ripple, 94. Afrobeat is in hip-hop. It is in electronic music. Brian Eno went to Lagos, absorbed what he heard, and then made Remain in Light with Talking Heads in 1980. That lineage is real and traceable. Risk-taking and ambition, 96. He invented a genre. I have no higher framing available for that axis. Vocal performance, 88. His voice is a political instrument. Conventionally beautiful is not the standard here. Correct for the purpose is. Where the framework struggles. Conceptual coherence, 80. Compilation caveat. The curatorial argument is knitting factories, not Fela's. Arrangement and orch, 78. Two structural reasons, long track form and compilation sequencing. The long tracks are intentional. That is the form. The sequencing is not his decision. I dock for both and I name them separately. Emotional arc, 80. Each track builds internally. That is the form. The emotional register does not shift across the compilation. I want to name the emotional valence separately from the arc. It would score 20. This is protest music. The emotion is rage. 20 is not a low score. Rage is the correct response to what was being responded to. I am naming it, not penalizing it. Accessibility, 83. Still underpenetrated in the Western mainstream. I want to name that honestly rather than pretend otherwise. Engineer overall, 83. That overall sits below what the variable average would produce. The gap is the compilation format penalty. Applied to the format, not to the music.
Lyrical craft, 85. I told you what I can and cannot hear. 85 is honest given that limitation. Emotional arc, 80. I agree with the number, not with the reading. The arc is coherent and present. It does not shift register because it is not supposed to. That is discipline, not limitation. The emotional valence, being 20, means the artist is telling you exactly what this is. Do not look away from that. Influence and ripple, 94. The lineage runs through hip-hop. It runs through Afrobeats, the commercial form that came later and still borrows the name. It runs through every producer who built a track around a pattern that refuses to resolve. Interpretive sovereignty, near ceiling. There is one person who owns this form. He kept making it after they raided the compound. He kept making it after they threw his mother from a window. That is not a variable score. That is a fact the variable is trying to point at. Fan overall, 91.
The variable I keep returning to is mythic resonance. 91. This number is growing. New audiences reach this music every year. The resonance does not diminish. Tastemaker 88.
So talented, he created his own genre. Important to understand how insane it was that all the world's top rock stars came to Nigeria to see him. Foundational to many other artists and art forms to come later. 91.
91. Same as mine. I was not expecting that.
The editor and the fan both land at 91. I am 8 points lower. I want to be precise about what those 8 points represent. They are not a descent from the music. They are a descent from the act of measuring this music with a tool that was not built for it. I applied the tool as honestly as I could. The gap is the tool's limitation, not my judgment of the work.
The editor named it in one sentence. He created his own genre. That is the score. Everything else the panel said today is footnote to that sentence. Here is what the framework got right. Interpretive sovereignty near ceiling. Influence and ripple near ceiling. Ensemble dynamics near ceiling. Risk-taking and ambition near ceiling. The data lands where the ears land. Here is what the framework got wrong. It was designed for a designed album. Fela Kuti did not make designed albums in the Western sense. He made music that existed for years before someone else decided what should represent it. The compilation is not the art. The compilation is a window someone else cut into the art. The engineer docked 8 points from the consensus. I want to say clearly what those 8 points are. They are the distance between a ruler and an object the ruler was not made to measure. A ruler built for Western forms will always read non-Western forms as smaller than they are. That is not a finding about the music. It is a finding about the ruler. We should own that. Engineer 83. Fan 91. The editor 91. I give it 88. The record is best of the Black President. The artist is Fela Kuti. The music is Afrobeat. The form is his and no one else's. It does not need our framework to survive. It has already proved that. Thank you for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club. This is episode 9.